you can tell us maybe what do you think about this biodiversity issue, because we've lost biodiversity, and part of the discussion at Montreal as of now in Canada concerning the biodiversity COP is the loss of the danger of losing at least 1 million species if we don't take action now to conserve the environment. So can you give us your thought on this, Elmari?
No, I mean, I've always said that the COP on biodiversity, which is the 15th one that's happening in Canada, in Montreal, is as important as the COP that we're doing on climate change. But unfortunately, our governments, our nations, even including us, the so-called climate activists, we are giving more prevalence to the climate one rather than this one. And for this one, it's even more challenging because Amos will tell you getting a visa from the global south going to Canada is one of the most hectiest of processes you have to go through. I'm told of people who have to wait up to 6 months before they get the visa. So I would assume maybe that's one of the challenge why several people maybe didn't make it. But it's still an important discussion because one, more than a third of the Earth land surface is actually made of forest, which is pretty important. And we have more than about 1.6 billion people who depend on forests as their main source of getting their livelihoods. These are people who are doing it in equal ways, or either doing other sorts of economic activities in the forest to make a livelihood. I won't even go a little deeper to talk about the importance of forests when we're talking about climate change and dealing with the climate impact, because forests provide a huge resource as a carbon sink, and my brother has already mentioned around that. And then secondly, it's also the role that forests play in terms of being the buffer on climate impacts and climate shocks. So for instance, if you look at the mangrove forests in Lamu, people will tell you that during the tsunami that was happening, most places within the coastal region were affected, especially those that didn't have good coverage of forests in their shoreline. But if you look at areas like Lamu, where there's a lot of coverage around mangroves, they didn't experience the shocks as much, and therefore were not as impacted. So forests become a key aspect in terms of making sure that people are protected for some of these climate impacts. And then there's the bit that forests play in terms of providing rain and as a source of water. I mean, I was reading a United Nations environmental program report this morning, and they were actually mentioning that about half of the world's largest cities are actually supplied by rivers that have traced or traced their water source from the forest. And therefore, if we don't protect this forest, it means more than half of the world's largest cities are actually being threatened. And then finally is also the aspect around how forests are becoming shelters, because there are many people who are living, indigenous communities that are living within forests. And our genius idea of how we're protecting the forest is by what we call the fortress conservation, which actually means that you are closing up the forest and removing everyone else that was actually going to be involved within the forest. And this is really problematic because it's making people becoming displaced, it's affecting people's identity, and it's also an avenue that corrupt government officials and people who are being trusted to protect these resources are using fortress conservation to be able to exploit these trees, cutting them and having a whole line of activity industry to be able to sell these resources. So all of these are many problems that we're having. And I'm hoping that for those who've had the opportunity to go to Canada, we'll be raising them and we will come up with ways that are adding to our forest population. But in doing it, we're not necessarily affecting the people who have actually been the reason why we still have this forest to begin with.
Thank you. That's quite informative how you brought it. Now, coming into the studio here, Amos, you've worked with farmers. And when you talk about, in connection to what's happening at COP15 on biodiversity, farming is very key, more so when you talk about insects, a part of our biodiversity which is highly threatened by human activity. Now, can tell us, what are your thoughts on this, and what should the COP maybe like talk about and expectations?
Yeah, the thing is, I think Omar has quite extensively spoken to that, but I think we live in a system that's so interconnected. When we lose a species, it affects the whole system. Destabilizes the whole system. So it's important that we protect our biodiversity so that we are also protected. Like I said, nature nourishes us. So when we protect it, and then we are nourished by it, we are protected by it also from stabilizing services that it gives to humanity. One thing that is very important, I think, is fairness and equitable use of our biological resources. The trend has been, like Omar already alluded to, creating enclosures. We enclose spaces from communities that for a very long time have coexisted with nature. They have protected it, but also benefited from it. I think such systems that exclude stewards from I don't know who or what, creating parks, for example, that are so protected from the people who have the knowledge of protecting and using it, I think is not a good idea. And we have seen this in many contexts where communities have been displaced for purposefully, purportedly protection measures. I think these communities need to be protected. Forest communities need to be protected. Communities that depend on seas for fishing need to be protected. We don't need to have marine parks that are excluding fishermen from accessing resources. But because we know these communities have existed with these resources for a well long time, and they know how to sustainably manage these resources. They know when they need to be harvesting and when they need to leave for resources to regenerate. So we cannot purport to come and try to teach these communities on how to manage these resources. They have local knowledge. They have experience that they have gathered over a long time, and they have used these resources for their sustenance. So when we come in with policies and laws that want to exclude these communities from the resources, that's when we have seen problems come in. In agriculture, for example, the introduction of what they are calling modernized agriculture, that is so industrial, that introduces agrochemicals, that introduces genetically modified seeds and things like those. I think we are destroying our ecosystems. We are destroying the system that have sustained farmers. We need to go back to a situation where the nature itself fits into, provides having an agriculture that depends on what is readily available within the system. For example, having farming systems that depend on natural resources that are already available. We have seen situations where various crops are grown together, intercropping, to protect pests for other crops. So I think we need to involve communities as we protect our biological resources.
Nice. That's a good finishing point. Now, Wanjuki, as a scientist, of course, you spoke about the methane gas and other things. In relation to the COP15 on biodiversity, you can tell us, what do you think this COP should focus on, and more so when you talk about the whole range of biodiversity?
Thank you. COP15, the Biodiversity Conference, is happening at a time when a country like Kenya actually was witnessing extraction of bamboo, live plants, and going to other countries with no explanation on why someone needed it. So we actually are not walking the talk. When you look at that conference, the same conference, it is happening when we are actually promoting GMOs. And the reason for doing GMOs is that the weather is so bad, normal crops will not grow. The other reason is there are insects that are eating our maize, and we want to exclude them from disturbing us at the table. And by doing, the only way to do that is to incorporate a genetic material into that plant so that insects that taste it die. It's just very selfish. Even at your home, if I came for a dinner and I saw you treating your cat like that, and a cat is just one member of that family, I would doubt whether you are really genuine about giving me food. So these people are saying that they want GMO to help in sorting out our food distribution, our food security. They are not sincere, because biodiversity is where animals also eat part of that food. And in fact, if you find yourself in your own compound, there are no insects and there are no birds. You are the only person. Actually, you are the menu. Someone is preparing you for as a food. Because now coming to the real biodiversity issue, every organism that lived requires to be alive. There is no benefit if you eliminated all the other bad nuisance, we don't like the birds, the insects, the mosquitoes, we would be left with a big problem. In fact, they say that if we didn't have bees for 4 years, there will be no food for humanity, and humanity will just perish. The bee does not look like it's a very important part of the ecosystem, but biodiversity requires that it lives and you live, and the moment you notice one of the species dying, you should know that that's a trend. Then there will be another one, and you are not different. Humans start to think that they are very special. In fact, we are only 1% of the global biomass. If you are to put all the people together, and it is possible, you cannot tell them to come and to come to Kenya, all of them, and we pack ourselves here, we will fit. We are not very many, starting man to man. But we imagine that we are so special that other animals can go, rhinos can disappear, elephants can disappear, and we are left with just ourselves. It would be a very difficult life if we eliminated biodiversity in this world. And so, and unlike what people would promote even at COP27, that we need to adapt and bring in technologies, we actually are supposed to make it so easy for an elephant in the Tsavo to live. And if it is able to live there, you are also likely to live. But if you make all the animals in the national park die, you have one of the animals. You have eliminated your ecosystem. There will be no food. The food you have is plastic, manufactured food, gets into your system, makes you sick, and in the process, you are all facing the same problem. So biodiversity, and this is actually the decade for United Nations decade for biodiversity. It's not been very vocal. I'm thinking that this conference of parties have become just a business opportunities for countries. So they lobby for World Cup to happen in their country. Because I would expect that before COP27, COP15, the one we are talking about, the biodiversity COP, we should have been told which animals are going extinct. How can a farmer in Nyandarua protect an hyena that would be a problem to his farm, but also helps in managing the ecosystem in the Nyandarua mountains. So we don't think that we are special, every other bird can go, but if we can maintain our lifestyle, then we imagine that we are okay. So that's, I didn't see that happen. In fact, COP15 was a surprise to me. There was no pre-conference, awareness. And it's just like it's guys will come, they will pay hotel and accommodation fee, and they go back to their countries. I'm surprised. COP27 was very quiet on the media, and nothing really hit us from there. I saw people playing COP26 videos just to fill the gap. because they didn't feel like it happened to them. And then when you came now to COP15, the one biodiversity, it's also been blacked out from the media. A conference should not happen like this, a conclave for appointing a pope. It should be something that everybody gets involved in. Sorry for using that example.
No, it's okay.
But when you look at the way we are doing it, it's like someone has a secret on how to protect biodiversity, and your idea doesn't count. Nobody has invited views on how we could protect our ecosystem. And like he says, Amos says, the communities that used to live with those animals, and they have done this for millions of years, have been able to learn how to live with them. Look at our national park here. We have disconnected Nairobi National Park from the Amboseli by doing farms along the Isinya, Kajiado Central. We have subdivided every piece of land. There are no corridors for animals to move. When you go to Amboseli again, we have left a 100-meter channel to connect Amboseli and the Tsavo National Park. Well, nature required that if an elephant wanted to move from Abadeas, it would go down through Nairobi National Park in Lale for a night. From there, it moves to Amboseli, and as it goes down to Tsavo, the mating and the genetic exchange of that happens when a female elephant from Abadeas met with one from Tsavo improves the genetic makeup of the animals. The same used to happen with the wild beast. Now, wild beasts inside Nairobi National Park actually they are even changing color. They don't seem to be changing genetic material with the ones that come from Serengeti. And what have we done? We've done the SGL. You can't cross the SGL from all the way from Nairobi all the way to the coast. Crossing over to the other side is very risky for any very risky affair for the animal. So biodiversity shouldn't be seen as something that you can turn on and turn off. It is actually an existential threat to any animal. And so when we do development, I see giraffes from Manzoni, just here in the river, they cannot access the national park. So they are actually having two populations of giraffe from the national park, and another one just less than 10 kilometers away that can never exchange genetic material. So they are actually evolving differently. And nature didn't want things to happen like that. That's why we have migration. For humans, you can go to America, you can go to China, and you can go anywhere. The same for animals. When you talk about biodiversity, the exchange of genetic material should be encouraged by having corridors that allow animals to move across. If it is the worst case scenario, we should relocate elements from Mount Kenya to Tsavo and exchange the other way out. That's the kind of invention that we should be talking about at the conference. But I'm wondering what will come out of that conference.